Hi, I'm John Prosinos, Chief Investment Strategist of Marijuana Profit Alert. With me today is Roy Bingham, CEO of BDSA, the leading research firm for the global cannabis market for recreational and medicinal cannabis. The research coming out of BDSA is considered the gold standard. I use it a lot myself, and I'm pleased that Roy Bingham was able to carve out some time to meet with me today. Thank you, Roy.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, cannabis equities had a rough 2022. We're immersed in a overall bear market right now. Stocks are slumping again as inflation runs harder than expected, and interest rates will probably run higher longer. What's your prognosis for marijuana equities within this rather bleak context?
Well, thanks for the easy first question, John. Yeah, we and our clients have a tremendous volume of accurate, up-to-date data on individual cannabis products, brands, companies, sales broken down by state, by category, subcategory, etc. It provides us with, unit volume, dollar value, growth rates, market share, trends, and all the rest of it in tons of detail. So we know a lot about individual companies' sales, volumes, prices, and trends. What we don't know very much is balance sheet and P&L, and certainly not market forces around the cannabis sector and or individual stocks. We leave that to other people. What I can say is that last year, as we all know, was a tough year, not just for the stocks, but for the market overall. It actually grew in the United States by only 2.3%. to $26 billion, which is the slowest growth rate we've ever experienced in the industry. That was driven by contractions in the big states out west, the big mature markets like California, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, Arizona, Nevada, all had either flat year or a contraction. Why? Well, it was largely driven by price reduction. So it wasn't that the unit volume sales were down, it was that prices were down very significantly. California prices were down 12%. Colorado prices are actually only down 6%, but Arizona was down 19%. Nevada was down 14%. So a lot of headwinds for the industry in competing with the illicit markets out there, with the burdens of taxes and regulatory controls, etc., and with the oversupply that we saw in a lot of those markets as well. So it was tough, but here's some good news. We're projecting that growth in the United States will be restored in 2023. We're seeing 14% growth in the market, from 26 billion to 30 billion this year, and a compound growth rate when we look longer term of 11% for the United States market to a $45 billion market by 2027. In due course, I imagine the financial markets will recognize the growth relative to other markets. Anyway, it's still exciting, isn't it? 11% growth is a hell of a lot better than most CPG sectors I can think of. And companies will execute their plans profitably and the stocks will get recognized. But at least the environment is in an improving environment, and the long-term opportunity is still very good.
Well, that's a nice bullish forecast that should please our subscribers. Marijuana obviously is still forbidden on the federal level. The states have stepped into the breach because of our system of federalism in the United States. The lifting of the federal ban has been this elusive holy grail. It continually seems to be around the corner, and it just doesn't happen. And it's certainly not going to happen now since the November 2022 midterm elections. Congress is bitterly divided. Several major pieces of legislation that aim to lift the federal ban, they're stalled now, even though some of them have already passed the House. But between now and 2030, how many new states do you envision adding legal markets, whether it's recreational or medicinal, to the overall cannabis market in the United States? And how much will that add to the revenue pie, all told?
Good question. So actually, our market forecast projections don't go out beyond 2027, John.
Okay.
So I can talk about up to 2027. The $45 billion number I just quoted was for 2027. And we expect 12 new states will launch adult use markets between now and then. Um, and then we also expect 12 new medical use states between now and then. And that is, of course, the biggest engine of growth in the industry. For the adult use states, of course, we have the recent additions of New Jersey and New York. Obviously, two big states are going to end up being very substantial markets. But beyond that, we're expecting Connecticut, Missouri, Maryland, Oklahoma, Virginia, Florida eventually, although it's a big medical market now, but by 25 or something like that, it's likely to have adult use. Ohio and Pennsylvania, of course, as well, another big market opportunity. And then the highlights for the medical states are the states that, 3 or 4 years ago, we would have all said, you're kidding, that's not going to happen. But Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Wisconsin are on that list as a high probability that we will see those markets open up.
What's really fascinating is how culturally conservative red states, and many of them are on the cusp of legalizing marijuana. So the old South is about to turn over a new leaf, so to speak. Let's look at the international picture. Marijuana obviously is a global phenomenon, and let's take a look at Europe. I think Europe is a fast-growing market that probably doesn't get enough attention. What's your prognosis for marijuana sales growth and legalization in Europe? One country that really interests me is Germany, the global growth engine of the EU. Germany is on the verge of legalizing marijuana. Won't that set an example for the rest of the continent?
Well, it certainly will if it happens, John. Yeah. Unfortunately, Germany is going to face some challenges that, I was born in the UK and the UK just decided to opt out of the EU. That's not going to happen in the case of Germany. But Germany is grappling with the European Union's legal restrictions and has to decide what sort of form it's going to go to the EU with for permission, and a lot of challenges associated that will likely introduce additional delays. We were thinking that that market would get going during 2023. I think there's now a risk that it could be 24 and it could be beyond. So when we come back to the big number, in 2027, we expect the global market to be $60 billion, of which the US will be about $45 billion, Canada will be about $6 billion. The remaining $9 billion will be those international markets that are really just nascent at the present time. And Germany, yes, we do expect to be the number one international market, followed by Mexico, actually, which is also doing a regulatory dance around this topic, though it isn't burdened by the exterior forces of the European Union. It's more an internal matter for Mexico. So, of course, Germany is, leading force within Europe. Many countries have actually explicitly said, we'll see what happens with Germany and the EU regulations, and that will determine what our policy is going to be. And so, if the German market does go ahead in a significant way, then we expect several other countries to follow suit.
Interesting. There's been a lot of hope about Germany legalizing pot in 2023, but according to you, EU bureaucratic red tape and hassles could delay that into 2024. I haven't heard that anywhere else. That's interesting.
It sounds quite possible. Yeah, I don't think that Germany has yet submitted its formal proposal to the EU.
Mm-hmm. Marijuana is often touted as a recession-resistant industry. But how badly does inflation, rising interest rates, and an economic slowdown hurt the marijuana industry? It seems that demand has shown that it is resistant to economic downturns, but how much of that thesis has been oversold?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think actually the big factor is unemployment. And of course, we're not really seeing, touch wood, major unemployment trends at the present time. Many cannabis consumers, as we know, consume cannabis in order to treat some kind of a condition. They may not buy it in the medical channel, they might buy it in an adult use channel, of course, but they're somewhere on the spectrum of very healthy to very unhealthy, and they're often treating things like anxiety, sleeplessness, back pain, other pain, etc., with cannabis. And of course, it becomes one of the highest priority purchases for their pocketbook. So, when your wallet gets squeezed, you prioritize and you still tend to consume cannabis. And so it is somewhat resistant. I don't know that we can say anything is resistant completely to an economic downturn that includes unemployment. And I mention this because a lot of cannabis consumers are relatively low on the socioeconomic spectrum. When you start to see layoffs in the lower paid positions, that might have more of an impact on cannabis. But touch wood, we're not seeing that.
Yeah. So one of the bright spots of the economy has been an unemployment rate that's the lowest since 1969. And we've seen rising wage growth and ample household savings. So that all rebounds to marijuana's benefit. Um, let's shift to an ancillary industry, psychedelics. More and more marijuana companies are getting involved in psychedelics. I never thought I'd see in my lifetime states legalizing LSD, psilocybin, MDMA, ketamine, the ayahuasca. It's a cultural revolution, and big pharma has taken notice, and they're ramping up their research and their clinical studies into, for instance, psilocybin, the psychoactive ingredient in magic mushrooms, researching how it can lift chronic depression, PTSD, anorexia nervosa, a whole list of psychological ailments that have been resistant to conventional therapies. Tell me, from a big picture standpoint, what sort of investment opportunities you see in the psychedelics market?
Well, it is fascinating that research is kicking off in a significant way. If you compare it to cannabis, unfortunately, there isn't the same platform of research from the 50s and 60s that there is for psychedelics. So naturally, the big pharma has picked up on it. In terms of the market trends and the market opportunity, it's rather too early for us to make any comment on that. This is, like the cannabis industry was 20 odd years ago, and it has a long way to go. I find it personally very interesting. I'm sure many investors do as well, and see it as an alternative engine of hope for people who've been suffering with psychological problems that were not being treated by conventional medicines. And look forward to great innovation in the area and ultimately some very successful products and trends. But I can't really comment on the size and the opportunity yet. It's super early.
Yeah, that's true. What are some of the most interesting subsectors of the marijuana industry from your perspective? For instance, picks and shovels plays, companies that allow other companies to do their work, companies that have a broad mix of different types of clients. What are some of the more interesting picks and shovels or subsectors of the marijuana industry that you're seeing?
Well, naturally, we're a pick and shovel for the industry. We're a provider of, market data and data analytics in general. And I think that the technology in this space is an interesting sector. It's also suffering from the malaise of investor capital in the industry space, and combined with a bit of a technology downturn at the present time as well. Everybody wants to know about their market. So data is very valuable. It's a sector to be investigated, and then point of sale systems, ERP systems, the way that you run businesses. There are a number that have been developed that are unique to the cannabis space, or adaptations of existing technological platforms. And then, of course, you've got marketing and sales capabilities. Advertising is still pretty small in this industry compared to others, because of the legal restrictions. But eventually, people will find an avenue to invest more money on that side of the business. And there should be potential for marketing technology businesses and marketing and advertising agencies in the space as well. Eventually you're going to see some 10 to 15% of revenues being spent in that area, like in other CPG products. We're far, far away from that now. So there's good growth opportunity.
Roy, that was very useful. Thanks for allowing us to tap your considerable expertise. Thanks so much.
Thank you. My pleasure, John.